Hey everyone, welcome to Redefining HR podcast. I'm your host, Lars Schmidt, and today I'm really excited to be joined by my friend Brendan Browne. Brendan is the head of leadership and executive talent at Y Combinator, former head of global recruiting at LinkedIn, and really has a career full of lessons and experiences that I'm excited to dig into with him in this episode. So, Brendan, thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
It's awesome
I'd love to have
here.
you. Yeah, let's start with an introduction.
Yeah, it's awesome to be here. It's great to see you, and it's great to see you doing so well. Thanks for the invite. I have made the transition from TA operator at scale to VC talent guy, making things happen with much earlier stage companies and having a blast.
Yeah, so there's a lot for us to kind of dig into in both of those roles, but I usually start at the beginning in these episodes. And you started as a recruiting manager at Sapient to kick off your career, and you've been in kind of recruiting and HR your entire career. Why recruiting? What originally drew you to the field to begin with?
I studied communications in Spanish, moved back home to Boston, lived with my parents, where they explained to me that there's going to be a lot of responsibility, rent to be paid, and so on. So I immediately thought I need to move out of my parents' house, and I really want to be on my own. And I fell into recruiting. There was a friend of the family who said, "Hey, you might make a really good headhunter." I was like, "I don't even know what that is. What's a headhunter?" And they had me meet some of their folks who are in the business. And there was a woman named Sherry Borstein who hired me to take me under her wing to kind of show me the ropes. So I fell into it. I had some immediate pure luck success. I got a few placements, that kind of thing, or it's just like it just happened to be, and that put some wind at my back, and that I never looked back at that point. So that was the start of it. It was an accident. I never planned on getting into recruiting. I had no idea what it was.
Yeah, I mean, look, my story is the same, kind of falling into it by accident. I think that's actually not that uncommon of a story, especially for people who've been, doing this as long as we have. So following your career path, you spent some time, obviously you started at Sapient. You were a recruiting leader at Microsoft, and recruiting leader, obviously, at LinkedIn. But in between, you were a head of people at Deem. And I'd love to learn more about that kind of detour, plan, maybe unplanned. Like, were you intentionally pursuing the CPO path when you went to Deem? Did it just kind of happen? Did you miss recruiting and kind of want to get back to that at LinkedIn? Like, walk me through that whole transition.
It's a good question. I was at Microsoft leading recruiting for Microsoft Research, which was a phenomenal, just awe-inspiring job. No type of recruiting I've experienced like it. It was, if we're recruiting people who are either going to go be a tenured professor at Stanford or CMU or MIT, or they're going to go do industrial research at Microsoft's research lab, which is amazing. But I made a very conscious decision. I wanted to get sort of back into startup land and left intentionally and joined Deem, which had raised $100 million, was scaling. I was the head of recruiting. And then it was sort of like battlefield promotion to lead HR, which was not really my intention, but I looked at it as a growth opportunity to leap in with both feet. And it was really, really tough. I mean, it was, I relied a lot on colleagues at other companies, people that actually the VCs put me in touch with to help out, sort of craft what I was doing. As an example, I remember it was a short notice thing, and it was like, you need to prepare a deck, compensation strategy and benchmarking for the board. And I remember that weekend, just freaking out, being like, I have really no idea what I'm going to do. So it was really kind of the generosity of sort of the network that helped kind of get me through that time. So it was an incredible learning experience. It was very hard, made a lot of mistakes, but learned probably more in a very short period of time than I have at any other company going through that experience. And when I, left there, going to LinkedIn, I mean, it's kind of weird to use these terms now, but I often call it the most meta job in sort of all of recruiting, because you're the recruiting guy at LinkedIn. I was more than happy to dive 100% back into recruiting.
Yeah. And so, you spent 11 years at LinkedIn, which, as we look at career spans today, that's like a couple lifetimes at one company. And you had a lot of different roles there, but the growth trajectory of the company from when you came to when you left was exponential. And I'd love to get your perspective. Like a lot of people are in TA leadership roles or even people leadership roles, and they're in that, kind of all healthy startups are scaling, they're growing. But we often use the term hyper growth. That's a subset, right, of that broader kind of static growth. When you hit that period where you're like this and you're going up, that's a very unique experience. And I'd love to get your perspective. Like obviously you've been through that, you led the recruiting engine for that at LinkedIn. What was the company size when you started? What was the company size when you left? And then maybe if you reflect back on that experience, what's one thing that you wish you knew at the end when you're kind of, beginning that straight up kind of curve? What's one thing you wish you knew and you kind of embedded into the foundations of your TA operations then at the beginning that maybe in hindsight you would have done?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I started when the company was, I think it was like 800 or 900 people, something like that. And then when I left, it was like 16,000 and change. So in terms of kind of lessons learned and reflections, I would have been much clearer upfront about expectations, like what I was going to do, like really sort of bright line expectations with all stakeholders and like not apologize for what I thought was necessary, which at that point, I mean, it's really two things. It was hire engineers and it was build my team. Like we could see the horizon, like this is going to be a much bigger company. I don't know if it's going to be 5X or 10X. I don't know how big. So therefore, I probably should have only put my time into like, is the engineering stuff on track? And am I recruiting my butt off to build out the TA team, in particular, TA management? I needed to create as much leverage as I possibly can. And I spent probably too much time thinking we could deliver everything in a desire to be, probably to get a pat on the back, frankly. I mean, it was sort of my ego involved and whatever my insecurities were that I need to deliver and get a pat on the back, where I just should have been like, we can do two things. We can hire engineers and I'm going to build out my team. Anything else is below the line. So that's something if you're out there and you're thinking about or in a TA leadership job, that would be my strong advice, because everyone around the table is generally not that happy with recruiting at that stage, because it's almost inhuman to keep up with the demand when things hit that kind of exponential growth curve. So part of the only way to do it is create really, really bright line expectations, hash it out. If people want to battle you on it, bring in the right people who can help back up your expectation setting. But it's, so critical. Otherwise, I mean, you're busy as it is. Otherwise you have no life, because you're just, all you're doing is trying to keep up. And, you need to be sort of a little bit more surgical in what you can do.
Yeah. I mean, what is obviously the recruiting market right now is unlike anything we've ever seen. Like, what is your take? It's almost, as somebody, we've both been kind of in recruiting for decades at this point between us. Like, there's never been a market like this for recruiting or HR or anything. But what is your perspective when you just see the levels of demand out there right now for recruiters?
I mean, I've got an interesting vantage point being sort of in VC land now, because hear about all these, just where the money's flowing, and the cost of capital has been like at or near zero, but will soon change. So everyone's got a fund, people raising bigger and bigger funds, putting in stuff, or more money in early stage, even huge PE firms putting money into early mid-stage companies. So it would only make sense that in turn, that goes to a lot of headcount, which in turn means that like you got to have recruiters. So I mean, the supply and demand dynamic is not sort of that foreign at the moment. But what I think it means is that the people that are strong can really differentiate themselves through these experiences, which I think is really, really, really unique. I mean, my advice to people is go take the biggest opportunity you can, one that scares you a little bit, and go work at it. If you're a good person who has potential, I mean, not experience, but the potential to learn new skills, deliver, you're curious, I think now is the time to take on as much experience as you can, because that's ingredient for transformation. That's the guarantee. You put in a couple, 3 years, year 3, you will be a different human being. You'll be a different professional. But the dynamic is obviously driven up compensation and things like that. I don't know where that's gonna all land, but I would say stick to your knitting in terms of what you've probably always done. Find a values-based company that aligns with who you are. Find a great boss, great mentor that's humongous. find a company that has a huge TAM that the company's going to chase after, dive in, because those are, even if a company doesn't become the next, big thing, the experience in and of itself will literally, I think, can accelerate you, years beyond where you're at.
Yeah, I'm curious to get your perspective. There's been discussions for years around the concept of like 10x engineers, right? Are there 10x recruiters from your perspective? And if so, like when you think about the very, if that does exist, or maybe a version of that, right? Just like recruiters that just operate at a different level than kind of the core industry. What makes them different? What makes them so productive?
I think there are 10x recruiters for sure. Footwork, use whatever analogy you want. I mean, you could use a sales analogy. You could like literally use like footwork, and for a big man in the NBA or something, like they practice this fundamental stuff, which is filling the funnel, converting, creating great experience, and having ridiculously outsized sense of urgency, and creating a sense of urgency where there isn't one. So if, I'm working with you and like you're a great partner, but you're not that urgent, I need to find a way to create that urgency with you, which might be like, Lars, I'm concerned with the pace we're going here. We get together, we got to deliver. It's not happening. You're rescheduling interviews, your feedback is weak. I mean, it's the people that have that tenacity and constantly creating a sense of urgency, I think end up being those 10x people. Because when I'm even on the receiving end, if someone's calling me out and be like, you said you delivered that thing at 5:00, you didn't do it, what's up? I have nothing but respect for that person. It might be like, eesh, might be cringy that I didn't do what I said I would do. But those are the people that I want to be around. Those are the people that are going to create outsized results. So, recruiters out there, there's nothing to apologize for ever when it's in the name of delivering business results. Obviously, people might have personal things going on. I mean, you need to be a human being. But when it comes to like driving urgency for outcomes, the more comfortable you can be around that, and the more you can even develop your own language around that. I use the term "I'm concerned" a lot, which is just a little nugget to throw out there. Just call you and be like, "Hey, Lars, I'm concerned." And you might be like, "Oh my God, what's he concerned about?" And then we can really get into it. Like, what's concerning you? Well, we're not gonna be where we need to be at the end of the quarter. I'm deeply concerned about it. And all of a sudden, you and I have this deeper connection. And so those are a few things I'd say people who want to be 10x recruiters should think about and internalize. And yeah, there are definitely people out there for sure.
One of the books that I often kind of reference and come back to is The Alliance by Reid Hoffman. And, I think it was so ahead of its time in terms of really just articulating and framing the relationship between an employee and an employer, and kind of mutual value add and clear expectations and understanding. And the concept of, tour of duty, which I know is something LinkedIn has been, and it's kind of rooted in how, LinkedIn has grown and developed and retained staff above levels that I think we'd see in other companies, because people know that they're going to be in a role. It's going to be 2 to 3 years. Then they're going to be able to move into a different role, a different team, a different thing altogether, perhaps, or perhaps leave the organization. Maybe there's not the right thing that aligns with what they want. And I'm curious to get your perspective. Like, how did, because there was so much internal movement and mobility with the tour of duty program at LinkedIn, how did that impact how you recruited, right? Like how you evaluated where you'd bring in outside or external talent, versus perhaps bringing somebody in internally from another team for a tour in the role?
And some of the sort of rhythm of the HR business would address some of that. So there's like some systemic processes, things like talent review. So we could say, all right, a bunch of us in a room with Nody, your manager knows that Lars wants to move into what biz ops from recruiting or whatever it is. So some of it is very intentional and planful. So we can then be like, all right, he's gonna vacate his head of recruiting job. He's gonna move in over here, or whatever it might be. We're gonna be intentional about making sure we move people in the right ways, and not to sort of put any drag on the system or drag on the business. So that's one. I mean, that's when it works kind of ideally. I don't know if it was more times than not, but plenty of times it was done seemingly last minute. Like maybe people knew, and all of a sudden they're springing like, Lars moving over here in 3 weeks. Like, what are you talking about? But it never really created a huge snag for recruiting, actually. Kind of on the flip side, the benefit was to go talk about it. with candidates. I mean, they would be really excited about the idea of like, oh, really? I could actually go from sales into recruiting, or I could go from engineering into product. Or there's numerous examples of people that had a career, pretty clear career plan, who might have said, I want to be, a CEO even. And, they got feedback like, all right, you're in the revenue business, you're in the sales business. You got to go work in product for a while. You got to go take a step back or 2 steps back for tour duty there. And then, when you're done with that, we can see if we can position you with even better experience. But if you want to be a CEO, you got to get that type of experience. So it was a really interesting culture that valued those types of career moves, which I think are super inspiring. Senior people that took, 2 steps backwards, at least optically what that looked like, but it has ended up, propelling them forward in a huge way. So I'm a huge fan of it. I sort of don't hear enough companies talking about the concept, frankly.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I can't sit here on the spot and name, another company or 2 companies that even embrace that. So I'd like to see more of that, especially in this environment now where, like, obviously talent is much more fluid. It's a lot harder to retain people. I think if they know that they've got those opportunities, and they know that, if you're really being thoughtful and planning of your career, like, I want to be a CEO. Well, you need these different types of skill sets to be able to do that.
Yep.
And you're able to do that with one company, and maybe, you're not going to move into the CEO role of that company necessarily, but you can get all the skills that you need to then find that role elsewhere and be a part of now that kind of LinkedIn alumni network. Yeah. I think that's huge. So, last year after, 11 years at LinkedIn, you yourself left, you moved over to Y Combinator. There's been a lot of movement I've seen from the kind of talent and people in-house side to the venture side over the last year. I think you're one of maybe 4 or 5 friends that have made that move. Like, what was your why? Like, what compelled you to kind of make that switch?
I knew for a few years that I wanted to learn more about the venture world. I had personal interest in doing like angel investing, so I was just generally interested in that topic, but also really wanted to understand how the venture world operated and literally how it functions, and how the players in that world work. And I had a bunch of friends that were talent partners, so I'd spent a bunch of time with them over the years. So I knew that that's what I wanted to do next. And my thinking was, I've had this unbelievable run at LinkedIn. I've seen a lot of stuff at various stages. I feel like I've got a lot to offer, and I felt like helping more than one company started to get really interesting. And working directly with founders, this morning was on the phone with founders. Yesterday was on the phone with founders. So that was super intriguing to me as well. So this was imparting my knowledge to these companies, and not even so much as the talent teams at these companies, albeit I do that, but it's helping founders become great talent leaders and become great recruiters. So in all the bumps and bruises I got along the way in my experience and the wins, I've just been super excited to be like, let me tell you the disaster that I lived through, like trying to tackle that problem. It wasn't that easy. Or like, hey, there is an easy solution to what you're trying to tackle. Let me tell you what that is. So there was a lot of draw to working with more than one company, working with founders, and then kind of intellectually getting an understanding of how venture works. And I definitely get that sort of up close. YC is an incredible place with incredible people. So I feel like it's just a giant learning experience at the same time.
Yeah, I'm curious, like, what is that transition like for you? You go from a role in a company, with a team, and obviously it's a large global growing organization. But you have a finite number of, real kind of stakeholders that you're working with closely. You have a clear kind of understanding of what the expectations are for your team from a headcount and growth standpoint, right? It's a world really well, to a different world where now you have dozens of stakeholders, all with different problems they're trying to solve, all with different levels of urgency, probably all quite high. So you're now managing kind of a different range of constituents and stakeholders and expectations. Like, how did you manage that transition? I think that's probably the biggest, that initial transition to that dynamic is probably the biggest thing that people moving from corporate to venture have to learn to adapt to. So what did you find in making that transition?
It's a good question. I'd bucket the things I do into advising and consulting, straight up search work, and then building community of top talent who can become advisors and a future pipeline to our portfolio companies. Probably those three things. At the stages, so most of the time I'm helping companies that are like Series B. They don't have complete executive teams. They definitely have key leadership roles that need to be filled. They may not even have a talent team yet. So the most common thing in a founder's life is that their time is so constrained. So if I've got 2 minutes with you to guide you and coach you, I better maximize that time. It's not the type of thing like, Lars, let me throw a half hour on the calendar next week. We're going to talk about sourcing. It just, there's no theoretical training that people have the time for, nor necessarily even need or want. So one, it's like sort of the way you talk and the way you relate to founders is different. The good news as well is like some of them have experience doing this, some don't. So even just like the core basic things you've learned in recruiting, if you're good at those things, imparting those things, is super important. In terms of like balancing all this stuff, constant prioritization. We have a couple prioritization meetings a week on the talent team, working with our partners to understand like, what are we really going to do? What's above the line? I give feedback. I feel like I'm not going to deliver well if I take on this much. Maybe I take on this much. Here's the issue with this. I feel like I should back off of working with that company because they're already in decent shape. Constant communication. I mean, in the VC world, a good talent team is such an important piece of one. We make an investment in a company. We have a vested interest in putting the best leadership team in that company to get them ready for the next phase of growth. Also, in doing that really, really well, and we build a great reputation, which I think we have on the YC talent team. It's attractive for founders. Hey, some of the other founders told me you guys are doing great work. You filled this job, you filled that job, you trained them on this, whatever it might be. That puts us in a good spot for future rounds of investment, to lead future rounds of investment and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Now that makes a lot of sense. And I think, one of the things that I'd love to get your perspective on, especially given those types of conversations you're having, is, the trend that we've been seeing for a couple of years, but certainly now is, companies are investing in ahead of people much earlier than they had in the past, even at the A stage, in some cases, even, usually not C, but, A, certainly by B, they realize that you need to have that, that person kind of thinking about the long-term scalability of the people infrastructure of the business so that, when you go from, 0 to 50 and then 50 to 500, you're able to do that. You're not, kind of operating off Excel spreadsheets and Band-Aids we had in the past, and then have to rip all of that out and put everything back in, which is hugely disruptive. And so lots of companies are hiring ahead of people earlier, maybe hiring ahead of people for the first time. I think a lot of the audience of Redefining HR are people maybe moving into those roles. And so I'd love to get your perspective. Like, you work with a lot of, even first and second time founders. What advice do you have for people leaders who are moving into those head of people seats to kind of, really understand and establish a strong relationship and partnership with their CEOs? Yeah,
it's a good question. And yes, a lot of people are doing it sort of, earlier and earlier. I would go get advice from people who have been through it. There's a few people I know that, there's one woman who's done tremendous work over the past, 10 years, but she's always been like, Brent, I'm the person who takes a company from like 100 to 1,000. That's what I do. Someone like that is just a wealth of knowledge about what the realities are when you step in like a 0 to 1 type environment, or like you step in and there's nothing, or step in, there's just a handful of people. So one, it's sort of like get sober and get real about what the job entails, like emotionally. What does it mean in terms of actually the work that needs to happen, the type of things you do, because you want to make sure that, I've talked to some folks who have a little bit, they're later stage or bigger company folks who are really amazing at that stage. They're really amazing. They can set strategy. They can move a group in a certain direction on an HR plan. That may have no applicability when you're 20 people, 25 people. So one is to get really, really, really clear. Second is to understand the work that needs to get done. And then if you're considering those jobs, demand that you spend a lot of time with founders, multiple hours with the founders, because you're going to be attached at the hip with that person. It's going to be a lot of victories, a lot of hard work, but understanding how that person thinks, truly how they view the talent and HR function is going to be paramount. And if you have any questions about whether there's alignment there for you, probably walk away, I would say, because the work's too hard. I mean, it's difficult. It's very rewarding work to be in company building, but it's hard. And you got to feel like that founder and you have shorthands. So, quick text to understand what each other is trying to get done, calls whenever you need to, giving you air cover where it's necessary, making sure that person will take direction from you as an HR leader to kind of represent the company in the right way and frankly say the right things at the right times. But if you don't have that, I mean, that goes for bigger companies too, but definitely in a startup, you'll be miserable. So I think that relationship obviously is key, and just demand the time to sit down and spend getting to know each other as a person and also as a leader.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And so I hope, viewers and listeners take that to heart. And I'm curious, kind of something you said around like how CEOs think about talent and people ops and recruiting. And I think early stage startups, they tend to be, very focused obviously on recruiting, key hires. Growth is essential at that stage. But as we think about, the landscape of modern HR today, whether it's like how we think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, how we think about workplace flexibility, hybrid structures, employee experience, right? I think all of these kind of, newer concepts of HR and like how we prioritize our work and think about our work. Does that resonate with them? Are they thinking about that? Like what has been your experience when you have conversations about, broader people ops outside of recruiting?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's an interesting observation too, in terms of like what's happening. All of the founders I work with think about talent and people strategically, I would say. They know that their culture is sort of like an accelerator for all that stuff. But they may not have experience or someone advising, coaching them, guiding on the things you just described. So I would say, if you're out there thinking about one of these jobs to be the head of people at a 100-person company, 50-person company, do what we talked about. But also see if you can glean in that kind of where the person's head is related to these topics, or even like do some coaching while you're interviewing them to see how they respond to it. Every founder I'm spending time with, it's clear to me I don't know what the right analogy is. They're like a blank canvas on some of these topics. Like they want to do this work, they want it to be filled in. So it's top of mind for people. And the big thing on their mind is like, obviously there's execution. These companies need to thrive and survive and scale. So it's all about execution and delivery. And they know that I want this to be the most amazing place to work on the planet, period. So they're wide open to being coached on this stuff. It's just, they don't know what they don't know. And some of them, it's like some of it's the first job, some of it's the first company they've founded. So, I think you got to go in assuming that there's even things that you might think are basic as an HR person, they'll eat it up. So, I think that bodes well for HR leaders out there that are steeped and really know these topics well and are passionate about them. That's a great example of like how you can influence. You can shape. You hear like these comments like, "Oh, you can come in HR and shape the culture." Yeah, you can. In those situations where you come in and you're coaching a founder on diversity or whatever it might be. It could be any topic related to HR. We want to have the best performance review process anywhere on the planet. Here's what that looks like. 9 out of 10 times that founder is gonna be like, "That's awesome, go do it." So I would say, there's a lack of knowledge just based on the fact that these founders may not have had those experiences. Maybe they haven't lived through those.
Yeah. Well, Brendan, I appreciate you, sharing your journey from LinkedIn to Y Combinator and all the insights you've gained along the way. We end every episode with a lightning round just to help the viewers learn a little bit more about you. So you ready to jump in?
Let's do it.
All right, man. I'm checking out your Spotify list. Who am I going to learn are the top 3 artists that are in frequent rotation?
Stuff that's in kind of heavy rotation. Phoebe Bridgers, I'm a big fan of. There's kind of electronic artist called Jimmy Stack, who I really, really like. And then anything produced by DJ Premier would be probably the 3 things.
All right. I'm about to check out DJ Premier, and you. I know you play guitar as well, so I'm also gonna have to check out some of your jams. You've been posting those on LinkedIn.
The other thing that's in heavy rotation is DJ Blue, which is I've got an album out there, so go listen to DJ Blue album both hands.
Right.
So yeah,
hey, I had no idea.
Yeah,
now I will definitely be checking out DJ Blue. That's awesome. Okay, we're gonna switch to the screen. What was your latest binge watch on Netflix, Amazon, whatever streaming service you prefer?
One that I get into. I mean, it's not new, but Russian Doll. Mm-hmm. So that was one that I got heavily into, and then You was another one I got into.
Okay. All right. We're shifting careers. You can't work. I'm taking venture off the table now as well. You can't work in recruiting or venture. What would you be doing?
I'd be making music.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're already doing that. Okay, you know what? I take that back. I'm taking that off the table too because you're already doing that. This has to be like a thing that you're not like maybe something you're always like, hey, it would be cool to do that, but you haven't actually done that. So since you actually have an album, that counts as being a musician.
All right, so I'm already doing that.
That's off the table.
Probably. I mean, I had interest early on in going into psychology, and I consider myself a pretty compassionate person, and sort of helping people is really, really important to me. So if I wasn't doing music or doing what I'm doing now, that might be interesting to pursue that as a path.
And last question for you: who is one HR leader who you admire and why?
Pat Waters. Yeah, probably kind of without hesitation, really. She. Any interaction I had with her in a one-on-one or any just work-related thing, she made me see things differently, gave me frameworks and sort of mental models to do great work and how to think about navigating. So she has been invaluable there. And I put a little post out there. I mean, there was a time where, we're talking about something and we're just tackling something difficult. And she said, Brent, I won't let you fail. And it was the most freeing thing that someone has said to me in that seat as a manager. And then the team that she led, we all adopted this whole idea of we won't let each other fail. So there's stuff like, and she's just awesome. She's fun. She's fantastic. She's a good human being, but she helped me immensely career-wise.
Yeah. Well, she's phenomenal. So it's cool to hear those personal anecdotes. And I love that notion of rallying around the idea that collectively we won't let each other fail. Yep. So Brendan, man, it's been fun. I appreciate you making time to come on the podcast, sharing your story. And thanks so much for letting us all tap into your wisdom.
Thanks for the invite, Lars. I enjoyed it.